Good evening and welcome everyone to this special webinar event sponsored by Johnson & Johnson MedTech, Considerations for Robotically Assisted Bronchoscopy Programs with Dr. Michael Mullins. As a reminder to our attendees and audience tonight, you are muted. We do encourage everyone to ask your questions throughout the lecture. You can simply do this by submitting them through the question feature. It's located on your control panel. We'll address the questions during the Q&A portion after the lecture. Once again, thank you for joining, and at this time I'll hand it off to Dr. Michael Mullins to get us started.
Okay, good evening, and thank you for setting a part of your day aside to hear about my experience with robotic-assisted bronchoscopy. And I'll just begin with a few introductory comments. This slide amuses me because right now, as I'm talking to you, I'm in Savannah, Georgia. It was about 95 degrees outside, 70% humidity, and looking at this picture of climbing a snow-covered peak is pretty appealing to me. But I also think that it illustrates a part of the journey. It is an uphill battle, a steep climb to start a interventional pulmonary program, but more than that, a omnibus cancer program in your center. And so I want to tell you kind of how we accomplished that here in Savannah. And I'd like to sort of organize this presentation around a few key points. One is some introduction, and then why I think robotically assisted bronchoscopy is a really good sort of foundation for building a thoracic oncology program, and then how to do that, and to relate to you, fourthly, how that journey has unfolded in my experience, and then to kind of come around the home stretch with some best practice recommendations, and to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you want to, and see if there's anything in my experience that I can impart to make it easier for you. So by way of introduction, this quote, I think, expresses a little bit of the emotion that comes, the roller coaster effect that comes from robotic assisted bronchoscopy. In my program, we went live on the Monarch platform in December of 2020, and it was not easy for me. The learning curve was difficult for me, and there was a lot of pressure to succeed and to deliver on the expectations of this new platform. And yet, by sticking with it and being persistent and doing procedure after procedure, you develop a certain muscle memory. It becomes very smooth and more routine. And then there's this transformation that happens where you're not stressed out every time you walk in to do a procedure, and it becomes fun. My experience is that I am a history major from the College of William and Mary, so not your typical probably interventional pulmonologist. I got my MD at Vanderbilt University and did my fellowship and all my residency too at University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And currently I'm the medical director of the Advanced Thoracic Oncology Center at the Candler St. Joseph's Health System here in Savannah. And we'll talk a little bit about that because the Thoracic Oncology Center actually did not exist until we built the robotic assisted bronchoscopy program. So a disclaimer, I am sponsored by Johnson & Johnson, and so we do use the Monarch platform in our institution, so I want you to be aware of that. So why do I think robotic assisted bronchoscopy is the key way to begin a good thoracic oncology center? Well, for one thing, the number of pulmonary nodules is immense. 1.6 million new pulmonary nodules discovered annually, and 48% of them are in the periphery of the lung. The average number of biopsies required for diagnosis is 1.7, and the number of lesions is expected to increase as lung cancer screening becomes more prevalent. Now, that tells you that there's plenty of nodules out there to pursue. And in the past, we've attempted to pursue them. I for one, came through the beginning of this journey with navigation bronchoscopy, electromagnetic navigation bronchoscopy. We had the super dimension system. And then after doing that for a number of years, switched over to the Varon system. And I'll say that myself, probably like many of you, the reason for moving from one platform to another was really trying to chase the brass ring, trying to get where we could have a sufficient diagnostic sensitivity to build an oncology program, a thoracic oncology program. And the guided bronchoscopy sensitivity has only been about 70%. And I'll tell you that's about right for me. I would say that when I was on the Super D or the Varon systems, that my yield was probably in the 68 to 70% range. And then we see here that if you move over to the robotics platform, that your sensitivity goes up. But still, 79.8%. What is not indicated here is that it jumps up to 90+% when you add advanced imaging, which we've done at our center. So we have the cone beam system at our portable cone beam. All right, so the benefits of robotically assisted bronchoscopy. Well, of course, it's effective, as we talked about. The sensitivity and diagnostic yield is far better than other modalities of guided bronchoscopy. It is safe. I think that these numbers reflect my experience and experience in other institutions nationwide, and that is pneumothorax rates of less than 1% versus something in the 7 to 10% range for CT-guided FNAs. And the pooled incidence of major bleeding less than 0.01%. I can't say that in the over 1,000 cases that I've done that I've seen any cases that I recall of major bleeding. And then finally, improved experience. And when we say improved experience, that really pertains to all the stakeholders involved in this process. For one, the patient typically only has to have one procedure because you get diagnosis and staging at one time, and that ends up translating into a reduction in unnecessary procedures and improves your time to diagnosis. So that reduces it by 3 weeks on average, which then translates actually into a survival increase because you're getting from referral to diagnosis faster. So how can we then convert that platform, that robotically assisted bronchoscopy platform, into something that can be the basis for your program? Well, this slide would reflect that. Number one, the platform itself sort of lays the foundation of the program. And one of the things that was a discussion point for me as I approached my administration was that the robotic platform was not the star of the show per se. The issue is really the program itself. You're trying to build a program, and that program is inclusive. It brings in other stakeholders from radiation oncology, medical oncology, other pulmonologists who may not be participating in interventional pulmonary but have patients that need to go through this journey. And so, my communication to administration was that this is going to lay the foundation. This is going to be a beachhead that establishes a distinct pathway for patients in thoracic oncology. And when I say a distinct pathway, it really is a distinct pathway. Anybody can order a CT-FNA, and CT-FNA can be done on any other organ system in the body. It doesn't carry with it any sort of distinguishing, marketable thoracic oncology focus. And when we when we have the robotic assisted bronchoscopy platform, which is specifically for addressing lung nodules, I think that that communicates to the patient and to your referral base that this is something special. This is something that reflects an expertise in thoracic oncology that you wouldn't experience by going a different pathway, say having a primary care doctor order a CT-FNA. The second part of having the robotic assisted bronchoscopy as your foundational platform for building a program is that it builds confidence. And when I say confidence, I also mean confidence across the whole range of stakeholders. It builds my confidence. I'll say that I spent 12 to 15 years sort of flailing about using electromagnetic bronchoscopy and even bringing on board Rebus, and never really felt that I was going to walk into the room and for sure walk out with an answer on every case. There were, of course, easy cases that you knew you were going to get, but there was always on cases of smaller nodules some expected apprehension that, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get to this. And I have a rule of thumb, and my rule of thumb is that an operator needs to be about 85% confident on a routine basis that their procedure is going to be successful, however we define that, in order for that procedure then to be comfortable for them to do on a repeated basis. It's very difficult intellectually, psychologically, to start expanding your patient selection if you're not confident in your ability to deliver results on those patients. Once you build confidence, then it allows you to move on to building processes. And when I say building processes, this is to say that we're going to now confidently make sure that all patients that have targetable nodules are going to come through our robotic platform consideration. And let me just sort of flesh that out for you a little bit. When our program started in December of 2020, we were doing approximately 290 CT-guided FNAs at our institution of lung nodules. And there really was not a realistic way to immediately disrupt that trend, because the process was in place for either primary care doctors or oncologists or radiation oncologists just to order the CT-FNA without necessarily taking into account the roles of other stakeholders. They would get the results of those biopsies and then make decisions after that of where to send the patient. Well, once we've built confidence with a robotic platform that all of these nodules, virtually all of these nodules that were being targeted with CT-FNA can be targeted safer and more efficiently with a robotics platform, you can put a process where all of the lung cancer screening LR4s come through a navigator to the interventional pulmonologist. They all go that way. They're all there for review. And that, in our experience, has resulted in an almost complete elimination of CT-guided FNA as the procedure of first choice for lung nodules. I think that that number is probably down in the teens from the nearly 300 when we first started. The next step, of course, once you build a process and you have a patient population and you can start acquiring some data on that population, is to develop quality metrics. And those quality metrics are very important for, number one, representing to regulatory agencies and number two, to your administration, that you're doing good work. But number three, it also helps in the right direction. And then finally, this platform helps us to engage the future. And by that, I'm really referring to therapeutics. none of the other prior platforms like electromagnetic navigation bronchoscopy or Rebus in combination with that provided enough stability and enough precision to realistically consider using therapeutics. And implied in this Engage the Future cog is the onboarding of advanced imaging, such as portable cone beam, to be an adjunctive feature with the robotics platform. Okay, so having said that, I want to just relate to you how this is played out in my institution. And of course, every institution is different. There's not going to be any way to rubber stamp, carbon copy, duplicate this from one institution to another, but there are commonalities I think that we share, and perhaps some pointers that come along or observations that come along that might help you to leverage a program in your own hospital system. So we'll share my clinical experience, and then I'll give you examples from our health system, and then just provide some considerations that you might want to implement. So my typical robotically assisted bronchoscopy procedure looks kind of like this, and I would say more accurately it would be this is how my day looks in the flow of my program. I generally schedule 2 to 3 procedures every morning, and I have found that doing 4 is just too much. It wears me out physically. It wears the staff out physically. It's a strain on the entire process, all the way from anesthesia to nursing to respiratory therapy. It's number one. Number two, I want to be sure that I spend as much time as I need to on each procedure. I don't really regard robotically assisted bronchoscopy as a procedure that is a fast procedure. I don't know that there's a virtue in trying to go fast with the procedure. The idea is safety and a answer for the patient that is as comprehensive as you can give them. And I do these procedures 4 days a week, and there's a reason that it's 4 days and not 5 days a week, and that has to do with trying to be inclusive with other people in the program who need space. Now, the procedures that I do, like I said, are done in the morning, although I'm rarely done until about 1:30. I then go over to clinic and see new patients, and a significant number of my new patients are done by way of Zoom, or actually not Zoom. They're done by telehealth, and we use the DoxyMe platform and FaceTime. And this is helpful for our community because we do have a lot of referrals that come from up to 2.5 hours away. And this allows us to review the imaging together. I can share the images over the computer screen and get them set up for their bronchoscopy. And I think that it also takes away some of the sense of surrender of the patient that can exist in your referral base, that they're sending them 2.5 hours away. It's kind of nice for them to feel like the patients are actually truly residing locally and just getting this procedure done in our facility. And I do rely extensively on my extender. My particular extender has worked with me for almost 17 years. And many of the routine follow-ups are done in the morning. So while I'm doing procedures, the extender will see follow-ups. And some of those follow-ups are routine pulmonary things, COPD, even sleep. I'm still board certified in sleep as my retirement plan. And then the findings are communicated with each procedure. I try to communicate them in real time. We have rows at our institution, and sometimes the Rose finding is definitive. It's clear what it is. Other times it's not so clear. And to the extent that I can communicate something meaningful to the referring doctor, even on Rose, I will reach out to them by giving them a phone call while the patient's in recovery, texting them, or some other means of communication to get to them. But we have our final path available generally within 48 hours. So we try to keep a pretty brisk turnaround. So it's important, in my view, to have a designated team. And when I say a designated team, I generally mean individuals who have daily repeated experience with this Monarch or other robotically assisted bronchoscopy platform. And in my program, we have, it says here, a rotating anesthesiologist, but let me flesh that out a little bit. We have an excellent nurse anesthetist. So the anesthesiologist will get things started for us, and then we have anesthetists who do a fantastic job. I've been to many different institutions and observed procedures, and I'll put these anesthetists up to any anesthesiologist that I've seen in the context of robotically assisted bronchoscopy. And the reason is because there's 3 or 4 of these anesthetists who, we know by name. They love doing these procedures, and so they've developed a real understanding of how the flow works with robotically assisted bronchoscopy. And it's very unusual to get anybody outside of those 3 or 4 anesthetists. We also have 3 dedicated respiratory therapists, and they are assigned to the bronchoscopy suite and essentially to robotically assisted bronchoscopy. They're not going and doing blood gases. They're not doing, exercise pulse oximetries or assisting with stress tests. They're there in that bronchoscopy lab with me every day, and they really understand the flow. These 3 respiratory therapists that I have worked with me for years. We also have 2 dedicated nurses. In our current case, we have a critical care nurse who's moved to our space, and another nurse who's been with us forever. And so they also have a good understanding of what's going on. We have a dedicated thoracic surgeon. We only have 1 thoracic surgeon. We have 3 or 4, 2 or 3, I should say, cardiothoracic surgeons. And the way that practice is siloed out in our institution is, at this point, the cardiac surgeons have moved completely away from doing thoracic, and we have 1 thoracic surgeon who resides right there in the Thoracic Oncology Center with me in the same office right next to me, and he is a wizard with the Da Vinci robot platform. We also have a full-time thoracic oncology navigator, and she lives in an office right next to me. So we have the thoracic surgeon, the navigator, and myself, all with offices right next to one another in the clinical area. And another important key to this, and it would be interesting to hear how this exists in other institutions, but I have a panel of 3 thoracic radiologists that I have read every single study. We have probably 18 to 20 radiologists, and there are only 3 that I designate to read thoracic cases, and it really makes a big difference to have a consistent, uniform style of reading, and to make sure that our cancer screenings are read properly, et cetera, and that we have good, solid communication with these thoracic radiologists. So a designated team is really helpful, and it makes the experience for the operator much more pleasant. I want to shift gears a little bit from the team itself to let you know where my procedures come from. I have a private practice pulmonary group. I'm part of a private practice pulmonary group. I'm one of the senior partners there. When I started, there were 3 of us. Now there's 13. And I've been with that group for almost 25 years. And we made a decision as a group that I would be the one doing advanced diagnostic bronchoscopy, and that I would be housed not in our pulmonology group office, but actually in the hospital's cancer center. And as a result of that sort of group decision, there is a free flow of referrals that come to me from my fellow pulmonologists within my group. I would say 15 to 20% of my patients are referred to me by my partners. And we have a very good understanding that those patients always go back to their referring pulmonologist. And sometimes, you know, a patient can hit it off with you, and they really want to, you know, try to talk you into moving into your office instead of staying with the referring doctor. And we absolutely resist that at all costs. We really want to respect the integrity of that relationship with the referring pulmonologist. And I think it's really important to do that so that those referring pulmonologists don't have any fear that you're going to take their patients from them. Also, there's really good communication with those pulmonologists, and they basically are in charge of management. I'll feed back to them opinions, and I'll present their cases at tumor board. They're welcome to do that, but by and large, I do that, and really try to make them feel like a part of the oncology decision-making process. I also have a lot of referrals from primary care doctors via lung cancer screening programs. I'll say that the lung cancer screening program has now become more established. The process is clearer. We have participation agreements with our primary care doctors now, so that if an abnormality that requires intervention appears on a lung cancer screening test, that comes directly to me, and they are moved right into the schedule for the Thoracic Oncology Center. I'm also getting more and more referrals from radiation oncologists, medical oncologists, urologists, and cardiologists with the calcium screening tests. We're seeing an awful lot of incidental nodules from cardiology. And then, of course, the emergency department is a good source of incidental findings. We also get a fair number from the local urgent care centers. So one thing that I want to try to communicate in a way that would be helpful is how important it is to make this whole process a good experience for everybody involved. And when I say that, I mean a good process for the referring doctors so that they actually feel good about their interaction with you, and then also the patients, and then also your administration. Everybody ought to come away feeling like they've really been taken care of. And I've seen in other institutions where all of the bones of the system are strong. Everything is being done right. The technology is in place. There's excellent infrastructure. There's a navigator. Pathology is right, and yet the communication that exists between the interventional pulmonologist and the referral base is broken somehow, or maybe it's confused. And that can happen a lot when there are multiple interventional pulmonologists doing the same procedure. It just can, I think, diffuse the experience in such a way that it makes it difficult to establish muscle memory in those referrals. We don't really have that here in Savannah, since I'm the one who does most all of the robotic procedures, the bronchoscopy procedures. Everybody knows who to send the patient to and how to get in touch with me. It's really important, in my opinion, to have quick turnaround time. I don't want the referring doctors to start back into a pattern of referring patients to the interventional radiologist again, because it's taking weeks and weeks to get in with me. And so I consider that crucial. So we try to get people scheduled within 3 to 5 days. Sometimes we've scheduled them the next day. The biggest limitation I would find to quick turnaround time for patients is actually the getting surgical clearance, being on Eliquis or Plavix. Okay, so the second thing is that I really try to capture phone numbers of anybody that calls me. So if you call me, I'm gonna enter you in right then and there. I'm gonna stop what I'm doing and put your name on it, and I've got you. And I do that with all the referring doctors, the extenders, whoever calls me or texts me. And then that means that the next communication that they get from me is going to be a personal communication. And what this does is that make sure that everybody is informed for the next steps to maintain efficiency. And so I really do believe that that elevates the experience of the primary care doctor. We try to be, you know, grateful and polite, and not treat the referring doctors like they're somehow less knowledgeable or in any way less an important part of the team than everybody else. Okay. The next part would be elevating the patient experience. So that ties in a little bit with elevating the experience of the referring doctor, because patients immediately see when you're communicating with referring doctors, and they love it. The more communication that's there, the more confident they feel about their care. In our case, almost all patients remain in our health system, that start in our health system, remain in our health system. A dedicated thoracic surgeon does 90% of my surgical cases, so we have very little leakage from a surgical standpoint. And then I endeavor to see each patient within 72 hours after the procedure to facilitate downstream treatment. And I will say that sometimes I will call a patient if I think something is crucial and get things moving way before then. The treatment decisions are made in our institution in a multidisciplinary fashion. Patients are presented at tumor board. They're presented sometimes before diagnosis, there are any number of different scenarios in which the patients are evaluated and handled with the multidisciplinary team. We also have a multidisciplinary clinic where we bring the patient in to talk to the surgeon, myself, radiation oncology, radiology, whoever else is pertinent to the patient's case. We'll see them in multidisciplinary clinic, and then we also have multidisciplinary tumor board. And finally, in terms of trying to elevate the experience of everybody involved, I think it's important to elevate the system experience. And by that, I'm really referring to administration. The administration needs to see, yes, that it is a financially successful program, but I think that they also need to see that it's a program that is a feather in the cap of the institution. And one of those key elements is to maintain trust. And when I say maintain trust, what I mean by that is that my administration knows, after long experience with me, that I don't ask for technology that doesn't make money for them. If I'm going to ask them to spend money, it's because I've done my homework and I know that it's going to be good for the institution. I don't just bring toys in to have them available. And establishing that trust, and sometimes making it clear to them that you have not asked for something for the sole reason that you didn't think that it was a responsible expenditure of hospital resources, it goes a long way. The other sort of secret weapon that I would recommend is having an advocate for the program who is maybe a middle management player with respect to the administration. And we have, for example, a respiratory department manager who has been the secret force behind the scenes to making things go forward. And part of that is because the administration trusts him because he works for them. He has really been a wonderful advocate and has skillfully and diplomatically communicated my needs and wants to administration. And communication, when I say communication is key, it's that communication through that intermediary, but also making sure that we're communicating to the patients and to the other doctors, and that we're not generating any sort of conflict that would filter back up to administration as a problem with the program. And then I would say finally that fast and caring go together. So we really try to get results quickly. I've had cases where we went from referral to diagnosis on rows in 16 hours. So it doesn't have to be a slow process, and patients are really excited because it's not like what they're used to experiencing. And when you generate a patient and provider experience that's that good, it always gets back to the administration and elevates the entire system's experience. So how did I get where I am with respect to the patient selection that I have? And this is a really important point, and I wish that somebody had explained this to me before. When you think about the building of a program, of course, the biggest issue is how can I get as many patients flowing through this program as possible so that it's really meaningful. And it's hard to do that if you're not proficient at the procedure, but you're not going to really gain proficiency at the procedure unless you do a lot of them. And what I found, as I alluded to earlier, is that there is a window of confidence that you have to operate in. So the first 50 patients, it would be better to have a patient selection that is less ambitious so that you can establish your confidence level there. And every technological decision that you make about tools that you bring in really ought to revolve around being able to achieve that 85% confidence window. So if it's necessary to get into that window by bringing in radial EBUS, then there's value for that. If it requires cone beam to get into that 85% window and start growing that window, then there's value in that. And in point of fact, I was able to demonstrate to my administration that by bringing in advanced imaging in the form of portable cone beam, that I could expand my window of selection from 1.2 centimeters and get it down to lesions routinely in the 7 to 8 millimeter range. And that's how you grow the program, but it takes time. So I've now done over 1,000 cases, and as confidence has increased, my target size has decreased. I routinely target small nodules, and that filters out to your referral basis, and then they stop having apprehensions about whether it's okay to send a small nodule to me because they understand that it is okay. And I will say that I haven't found a technology that solves the problem of BMI. And as a rule, patients with a BMI of greater than 45 to 50 are extremely difficult. I would rather biopsy an 8 millimeter lesion in the upper lobe of a skinny patient than try to biopsy a 2 centimeter lesion in a patient with a BMI of 50. I've actually become somewhat more selective with patients that have high BMIs, in the sense that I will send them for CTFNA if they have a BMI of greater than 45 or 50, sort of a range there, that are located in dependent portions of the lung. I'll still biopsy the middle lobe, the lingula, the anterior segments of the upper lobes, but patients with medial, basilar, lower lobe lesions who have high BMIs, I really think that life is too short to flail about trying to get those when really they need to be biopsied in the prone position in IR. So let me just share with you now the results of all that work. We have achieved about 82% of regional thoracic market share, which is huge because we started out around 50%. Our respiratory manager that I told you about has really helped move the program forward. There is, even though there's a staging lag in all cancer registries, we have enough time frame now to see that we've gone from about 35% stage 1 diagnoses for all comers now to close to 50%. So that's been tremendous progress since we initiated the robotics platform. Now, just on the negative side, we haven't yet developed robust performance indicators. And I think a part of that is just because we've been so busy that we haven't been able yet to step back and look at performance indicators. And frankly, in terms of looking at financial data, my administration and probably yours are not terribly generous in sharing with us just how much money we're making for the hospital. I would also say that tissue adequacy has been an ongoing challenge. The diagnostic yield is fabulous, but we still struggle in getting enough tissue density to get biomarker testing, and that's a frontier that I'm very interested in beating back. Clinical trials also have not yet materialized at our institution. This is new for our institution. We have done clinical trials under the NCCN. Medical oncology trials have been numerous, but doing a clinical trial with a technology, a device technology like this is really outside of the comfort zone of our IRB. But I think that as time goes on and we develop a greater rapport with the IRB and opportunities to do some clinical trial participation, that will be a sign of maturity in our program that we have just not gotten to yet. Okay, so best practice recommendations. So I definitely think that using the robotic assisted bronchoscopy platform is an excellent way to build a robust thoracic oncology program. And I think in order to do that, it's really important that you go into it with the contemplation that this needs to be a consistent team with a designated bronchoscopy suite. It's really hard to do a good job with a quilt work of people. Trying to piece this together just doesn't work. And that needs to be a transparent discussion with administration in considering the costs of the robotics platform, that it comes with a team. And then I would also say that growing relationships with other physicians to try to build a referral network is key. And then let me just add also, when I say building a consistent robotics assisted bronchoscopy team, then my bias is that the interventional pulmonologist list needs to be as narrow as possible. The fewer people that are doing that procedure in your institution, the better. The quality of the procedure is going to be better. The consistency is going to be better. And I think that this is not a procedure, in my opinion, that is the same as EBUS or cleanouts or routine transbronchial biopsies. This is something that really requires somebody doing the same thing over and over, day in and day out. Okay, so best additional recommendations for best practices. I try to see each patient in the office within 72 hours after the procedure. Very important to have a dedicated thoracic surgeon, and that thoracic surgeon, if possible, ought to be housed in proximity to the interventional pulmonologist to facilitate quick referrals and multidisciplinary engagement. And then again, I would recommend designated operators that are focused on the procedure, that are not doing other things, that are not in the ICU, that are not taking pulmonary consults. And then develop a multidisciplinary team for lung cancer evaluation. This is not a Lone Ranger field, and I think that having a multidisciplinary team is best for the patient and also communicates to everybody what you're doing is at a very high level. Okay, well, that's what I have for the formal presentation, and I would very much like to open the floor up to any questions that might be out there.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. That was an excellent presentation. As a reminder to our audience, feel free to submit your questions in the question feature or in the chat, and we will get started. I'm going to welcome Catherine to hop back on, and we will begin.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. So our first question for Dr. Mullins, how do you manage competition within and outside of your system?
Okay, that's a pretty prickly question, and I think that everybody encounters this in one form or another within their group, within their institution. And so to address the first part of that, and that is how do we deal with competition amongst ourselves in the IP community and advanced bronchoscopy community within your practice. In my case, I had been doing robotically assisted bronchoscopies for about 2.5 years, 3 years. And one of my partners decided that they wanted to start doing it. And it was an uncomfortable interaction in the sense that I really felt like, from my standpoint, selfishly, of course, that I do it better, and that I'm focused on it, and that the patients really deserve to have that focused expertise that can only be developed at high volumes. And yet, I also had to acknowledge that there are going to be legitimate claims to participating in a program. And so the way that we work that out is that I have block time 4 days a week, and that 1 day a week I go to a satellite office. They whisk me out of town to keep me out of the bronch suite, and that day is dedicated to any other credentialed operators that want to do the robotic procedures on their own, generally on their own patients. Now that's the sort of internal peace and harmony that we developed in our own system. With respect to competition from other systems, we're blessed in our city to really not really have fierce competition, or at least it doesn't feel like it's fierce competition. There hasn't really been conflict there. I will say that I try to gain a sort of step up on the competition, not so much by pretending that I'm somehow better than they are, but just by making it such a pleasant experience for the referring doctors that they're addicted and they can't possibly think about trying to send that patient to anybody else, because I've made it where they almost just think it and it happens. So that's kind of how I would begin with dealing with competition. We've done pretty well here, as you see. The market share in our region is about 82%. Those are hospital numbers, and that's with a interventional pulmonologist across town who's doing just what I do.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. You had mentioned you have a pretty dedicated staff when it comes to your procedures. Is that something you've always had, or did you advocate for that over time? Could you maybe tell us a little about that, your team specifically?
We have had a dedicated bronchoscopy suite team for as long as I've been in practice in Savannah. The team has evolved over time in a couple of ways. So before having the robotics platform, the bronchoscopy suite staff did other things as well. So they were tasked to do the stress test and the blood gases and spirometries. And so even though they were designated to be the bronchoscopy support crew, there was a lot of stress in terms of trying to fulfill multiple different duties. And as this program has grown, essentially what I've tried to do is to suffocate out all the other competitors for their attention. That is to say that we're doing so well, we're doing so much volume, that we need to come up with a different way to get those other jobs done by people who aren't specialized in the bronchoscopy suite. So for example, this may come as a surprise to you, but prior to this past year, our bronchoscopy team went upstairs for every ICU bronch, every bedside was done by them. And basically what I said was, that's got to stop. There's no reason why the respiratory therapist in the ICU can't do those bronchoscopies with the pulmonologist. And so we switched over to disposable scopes to do the bedside bronchoscopies. And so that completely removed that distracting task from the now the interventional pulmonary team. And the blood gases, the oximetries now are also moved off to the floor. That has made this team more and more focused over time.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mullins, so much for sharing your experience with the group today. That's the conclusion of today's talk. Emily, do you have any other final comments?
No, I would like to thank Dr. Mullins for an excellent and informative presentation, and obviously Johnson & Johnson for being 2024 sponsors. And we look forward to everyone joining us at more webinar events. Thank you again, Dr. Mullins. It was excellent.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.